we say, fam? Welcome to Simplexity, a podcast where we take seemingly complex matters and attempt to make them plain and simple. You notice I'm sort of fumbling over my words this morning, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I got sunburn on my lips.
What?
Yes, yeah. So my lips burn a little bit, and now it's starting to crack.
You need that Burt's Bees, my friend.
And I've been putting all kinds of ointment and different types of things that's not working, but I got to keep them moist, and so I sort of talk like, because I don't like them to connect, because it hurts.
Well,
so
to
I'm
be
just
fair,
gonna.
I didn't notice.
Oh,
but that is a fascinating tidbit, and now I can't stop trying to.
You can't tell, can you?
I don't think so.
No, good, thanks. Appreciate it.
Just got a little tan going there.
My lips are tan. Anywho,
welcome. To episode 2 of season 4.
Starting off with a bang. Ouch, even that hurts a little bit. Anywho, what are we going to get into today?
You tell me, my friend.
Okay, good. I got something. Now, every once in a while, when it comes to, the content from week to week that we decide upon, really we sort of field by way of a little survey. We did this at the end of season 3.
Yeah.
By really, wanting to hear from what do you want us to talk about? What are the interested topics therein? And then some that really, you and I just sort of surfaced by way of when we're talking, conversating.
Like the last one, the true crime one.
Absolutely.
Nobody sent that one in.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Wherein sometimes I really sort of maybe get a burr, if you will, under my old saddle. And I want to talk about something that's near and dear or that I'm thinking through by way of maybe my pastoral lens or just something that I've recently read, what have you. This would be one of those episodes.
Yeah, and I always enjoy those episodes.
Oh, I very much appreciate that. So like we talked about imago dialogue.
Yeah, that was something that you were working through and currently feeling very burdened and passionate about.
Absolutely.
And I found it quite helpful.
Yes. And this would be one that as of recent, just Lord, tip my hand a little bit. Beck would probably not approve of this, but I've been working on a new book project.
Okay.
And
you heard it here first. Simplexity.
There you go. See, the inside scoop.
That's why you tune in.
But this is something that I believe is what I would call a now word. Like this is something that I'm wrestling through that I believe people should sort of work through. And I'll set it up like this. I think that when it comes to those that claim the name of Jesus, meaning they've surrendered their life to his lordship, they understand where their marching orders come from. They understand the incredible inheritance of now our newfound salvation, our sonship, our daughtership, our eternal hope that lies before us. That changes the way that you see things and that you think about things. First and foremost, our theology is a heart matter. It really converts, number one, we become dead to sin, alive to Christ. No longer do we live according to the flesh, but now we're led by the Holy Spirit that guides us and teaches us and directs us and shows and reveals certain things to us, all according to Scripture. And so there's a mentality change that takes place, obviously by the way that we think, even at times the way we feel. But then I really believe that the true telltale of the believer that is being sanctified, there's a lifestyle change. That there's a very visible and sort of tangible lifestyle shift in the life of the believer. And so at times we can talk about theology and we can talk about, biblical doctrine, and yet we're a little adverse to making it overly practical. Where I stand in contrast to that, because I believe one of the beautiful things, especially found in the life teachings and gospels that captured the life of Jesus is that he really commended a very practical lifestyle change, as did the Apostle Paul, any of the New Testament writers for that matter. You could argue the whole of Scripture spoke to a lifestyle shift, meaning you should see it.
Yeah.
You should see, as Jesus so, surmised and coined, said, you'll know my disciples by a lifestyle, by their love one for another. Mm-hmm. You're going to see it, you're going to hear it, you're going to feel it. They're going to have a whole lot of love for those around them, especially those that are in the family of God with them. So I think that there's a lifestyle shift. Yet at times, there's specific lifestyle shifts that I think go woefully undervalued.
Okay.
Like we talk a lot about you should love your neighbor. We talk a lot about we should forgive those that hurt you. We talk a lot about let your words be seasoned with grace, but yet at the same time truthful. We talk about, but sometimes there's subtleties that I think are so pronounced that they stand out like stark in a culture like the one we live in. This episode, that was quite the setup, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm ready.
You're looking at me like this.
That's because I'm so enthralled.
So Paul writes a little letter to the church at Thessalonica, and he makes this profound statement because he was talking largely through this first letter to them about order and about certain conducts and about a life that pleases God. And then he gets to the 11th verse in the 4th chapter. Feel the crescendo.
Now here it comes.
Our pastor's coming out.
Here it comes. And he says this. Now I'm going to read it to you in the Good News translation.
Okay.
Other translations will have a varying of words, but this translation says this. Make it your aim. Some translations will say make it your priority. But your aim, to make something your aim would infer there's got to be a target that you're heading for. This should be the target. This then creates the guardrails because that's when you know you're on the right path. So make it your aim to hit this target.
Okay.
To live a quiet life. To mind your own business. To mind your own business. To, listen to this, to earn your own living.
Yeah.
It's major. Just as we told you before. So obviously, Paul now is going to refer back to not using the specific words that he just used in verse 11, but he's going to refer back to even when he spoke to the Corinthians, even when he spoke to those in Philippi. He's going to say, I've shown you this, and I've told you this. I've lived this, and I've commended this. This is nothing new. Live a quiet life, mind your own business, work with your own hands. This is what he says. In this way, you will win the respect of those who are not believers, and you will not have to depend on anyone for what you need. What Paul just said is that there should be a lifestyle shift in the follower of Jesus that looks like this. Quietness, staying in your own lane, and working hard, not milking the system, not being lazy, but living a life that's a testimony to those that don't believe in Jesus yet. He said that is a rich testimony.
Yeah.
I want to contrast that to the culture we currently live.
Ooh. So those three areas.
Those three areas.
Okay.
So at face value, I could say in 2023, and now for all intents and purposes, this is focused largely towards my family members. So I'm not talking about the world.
Church.
I'm not talking about those that don't follow Jesus.
Okay.
These are my people. These are my brothers and sisters on the way to the celestial city. Yeah. Come on, somebody. That are all journeying together. We are so freaking loud.
Yeah.
We are in everybody else's business but our own. And we are lazy to the point that we actually feel justified in doing the bare minimum, but expecting the maximum result. And yet, we've reduced our testimony largely to a whole bunch of talk.
Yeah.
And a whole bunch of jargon and a whole bunch of noise. And then we wonder, why doesn't the world respect us? Mm-hmm. Now, there's an aspect of the world that will never respect us because the dark hates the light. I get it.
We don't need to make it easier for them, though.
We don't need, well said, friend. We are making it so easy because we are so loud. Mm-hmm. We are all up in everybody else's business. And yet we have lost the value of work ethic. Okay. This is why Paul says, whatever your hand finds to do, do it as unto the Lord. Not for earthly masters. It's not even for your employer. It's that you are a representative and an ambassador to me. Work for me if you don't like them, so that your testimony stays intact. But first and foremost, I want to break this into 3 parts, our little chit chat.
Okay.
First is, I feel like there should be an incentive in the believer that we've lost, to understand the value of quietness. Mm-hmm. Like, if there is ever a day where less is more, it's right now. I mean, just, so let me ask you a question. And this is a genuine question.
Okay.
You're in the church world. Mm-hmm. And so I imagine if I was to look at your For You page, I'm thinking the best about you right now.
Oh, thank you.
But if I was to go to your For You, I would imagine you being, hey, you're the campus director. I like to call you the campus pastor here, little pastor.
Well, not yet.
I can say whatever I want in my words.
You can.
So when you're in, this is your sphere or world, and that be ministry. I imagine that you follow a lot of different various voices and ministers.
Yep.
Is it just me, or has the impact of our words lost their weight because they're so frequent and so many? Do you flip through your reel and be like, wow, that was incredible? And that's genuine. I'm not leading you. Mm-hmm. And so if that's actually going to be opposite of what I suppose or think, be truthful.
Be truthful, shame the devil. No, I would say, I think it is so loud and there are so many people. I've actually tried to follow fewer.
Huh.
Just because there's so many different opinions, there's so much noise that I get overwhelmed by it.
Right.
So I'll maybe pick a few that I value or I respect or I find weight in their words.
Sure.
And then I'll try to focus in on, okay, these are the voices that I'll listen to. Because otherwise it's overwhelming and I can't handle it.
Absolutely. And I think that not only is it loud by volume, like now when I speak about volume, like I want to speak specifically to decibels. Actually, I just read in the National Institute of Health, they said that there is a direct correlation to anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation that is directly correlated to urban noise pollution. To just how often your ears are intaking volume of people chattering in dense workplaces, volume of automobiles coming and going, volume of construction that's going on that we are mindless to. Totally get it. We live in a densely populated area. But what's happening is that you were created, I believe, we were created, designed by God, that there is a gross imbalance in the amount of quietness that we actually need. Not just, and I'm not talking about Sabbath. That's another layer to this. I'm talking about just quiet of there not being interaction, quiet of us not having to use our voice, quiet of us being able to sit in stillness, quietness of us being in the confines of our own four walls and not needing to turn on a television, a phone, a device, a speaker, just sitting in quiet. That's one aspect. But it's not only just volume by way of decibels, it's volume by way of frequency. Like we are constantly inundated with our eyes capturing images, listening to voices, speaking, recording videos, what have you. When Paul said, make it your aim to lead a quiet life, he was speaking about both output and intake. Like, don't talk so much. I mean, he's the one that said, be slow to speak, quick to listen. But don't talk so much. Don't feel like you got to record every thought you have. This is going to be offensive. Every thought you have is not for mass consumption. Because the truth is, many of those thoughts that you're putting out for mass consumption, they're not even your thoughts. So shut up.
What do you mean they're not even your thoughts?
You're just recycling somebody else's material because you don't know how not to talk. And you gotta solicit and garner attention because this is the compulsive pattern that you've fallen into. That is anything but a quiet life. Just shut up and be quiet and find the value for your soul in it. Second, stop listening to so much. You don't have to turn the device on. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. If you got a radio in the car, it's not mandatory that you turn it on. Did you know that, Beck? Hey, just because you have a device that, they sold you under the premise of, it's a smartphone and you can make phone calls with it, but actually that's just a little subsidiary of it. You don't have to thumb through it. Why? Because it's making you sick.
Yeah, and if I can just jump off of that, you recall when we did a staff retreat a couple of years ago, I guess, and one of the practices that we were led through was practicing quiet.
Right.
And we left our phones and we went to, a certain spot on the campus. And I believe we just sat there in silence for approximately 30 minutes, something like that. It might have even been less. But it was so refreshing to the point that several staff members were brought to tears.
That's right.
Brought to tears from 30
right.
minutes of silence.
Yep.
And that speaks to how connected we are to the noise and to listening to stuff constantly.
Totally. One of the reasons that we hate being quiet is because then we got to deal with ourselves. And that's our own inner voice, our own inner narrative, our own inner fears, our own inner insecurities. I get it. But you are healthier to deal with them, having had to deal with them, than you are preoccupying yourself so you don't have to deal with them. Noise is killing us. Actually, there was a study about all the soldiers that came home from Desert Storm on. So this is during George H. Bush, campaign. This is George W. So this was Desert Storm was the first invasion of the Middle East, and then there was the aftermath of what was the 9/11, travesty. And so then it was Fallujah, the shock and awe campaign. The soldiers that came home from the Afghan war, Saudi Arabia, what have you, from Desert Storm on, the PTSD claims and therapy needed and trauma that took place or cases that were grossly outweighed those from even the Korean War, Vietnam, most certainly World War II, because of one finding, and that was in the journey back from overseas, it was found to be that those in the previous wars were able to sit on whether it was carrier decks, the destroyers, or in transit with no preoccupied device. So they were able just to mentally process all that they witnessed, they saw, the trauma that they underwent, but they had time in the quiet to deal with it. So by the time they got on American soil, they had done the mental and emotional work to calibrate to all that they had been through. Not to say that they didn't need therapists and other counselors to help them, but what took place in the Afghan war and in the aftermath was that everybody en route home were busy thumbing their devices, keeping them preoccupied so they didn't have to deal with whether it was the trauma they saw or the death that they witnessed, yada, yada, yada. And so they came home only to realize they never wrung out, as some therapists would coin the term. They were never able to empty themselves out and do the mental work that needed. When you think of even the Old Testament, when God would call the nation of Israel to invade, whether it was the Hittites or the Jebusites, and he say, I want you to lay waste to everyone. I understand that there was probably a protective covering of the Holy Spirit that kept those men's minds sane, but they watched women and children and animals and the like be slaughtered. I've often wondered, how could they come home and not have mental trauma at all of the bloodshed that they underwent? I think a lot of it was resolved in the quiet. Is that they did not have somebody chattering in their voice or a device that kept them preoccupied. It was them and Jesus, and they were mentally and emotionally stronger for it. All I'm saying is, I'm saying a lot. What I'm saying is this idea of make it your aim to lead a quiet life means show more, talk less, both in output and intake. And I believe more now than ever, this is a lifestyle principle that the world is desperate to see and that our souls severely crave.
Yeah.
You know, in Teen Challenge, so when I was in this program, there was certain days during the month that it was called mandatory talk fast. So you weren't allowed to talk.
Oh, well.
So it was a talk fast. So it was.
I interpreted that the other way. Hey, how's everybody doing? It's like, what is the purpose of that?
Like an auctioneer.
Yeah.
No, it was a talk fast. So the whole campus, this was in Rearsburg, Pennsylvania, the whole campus, and there was 300 men on this mountain that was in the second phase of this drug rehabilitation program. The whole campus was quiet. And here's what was fascinating. Here is what was fascinating, is that you were to be quiet from 8 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. And so that day was tailored in such a way that you didn't need to interface with anybody to ask for something or be instructed with anything.
Yeah.
It was an autopilot day. You knew exactly what you were to do. By the end of the day, by, I would say, the 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock hour, your hearing was so keen, like you could hear a conversation that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, by the way.
But like, I remember this one day, I was sitting in the cafeteria. I could hear the kitchen, because it was this mask, you could hear the cooks in the back speaking. And what was also fascinating is the next day, some guys would just take it upon themselves to continue their talk fast. These were the super spiritual guys. You would hear, like, the conversations that would ensue all around you were so foolish.
Huh.
They were so nothingness.
Yeah.
Like, you'd be so keen to be like, what are they talking about? Because when your words are few, but your ears are on high alert, you realize there is so much nonsense being spoken. And I think until you quiet down, you don't realize how much of that is intake.
Yeah.
And how much of that then you're a culprit of. Mm-hmm. Like you play into, and just your daily chatter consists of so much nonsense.
Yeah, and even while you were sharing that example, I was thinking about how difficult that is for us in our context here at the church. I don't know if you recall, whenever we do a Easter service or a Good Friday service, it's often brought up in the planning and preparation for those services. Okay, we're going to end the Good Friday one on a reverent note, on a somber note, and we're going to encourage the congregation.
Keep your talk to a minimum.
Please don't talk while you're exiting the sanctuary. Seems like a pretty simple request, and yet every year it seems like that request is made, and then, all right, so what do you guys think? I thought that was great. It was interesting that John didn't preach this year. It was Sammy. That was weird. So, but it's just so funny how tough it is.
Where do you want to go to dinner? You hungry?
Yeah.
Right.
To practice that.
Yes. So 1, lead a quiet life. 2, mind your own business. Now, I take this in 2 different ways. One is mind your own business being stay in your own lane. Like there's a proverb that says, he that grabs a dog by the ear is likely to get bit, as one that involves themselves in a quarrel that is not theirs. Mm-hmm. Like, why are we all up in every Tom, Dick, and Harry's lane, casting our opinions or perspectives or, principles, or I wouldn't have done it like that, or I knew they were
commentary.
Just commentary.
Drama.
It's not your business.
Yeah.
And then we feel justified in what we would, like our opinion is how we justify our gossip. Mm-hmm. It's not your business. So you're only adding kindling to an already fire that many times God wants to put out, or that could be a learning lesson for the one that's enduring it, but we feel so self-righteous to be like, oh, I got an opinion on everything. Well, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be truth speakers, but we should not be truth speakers on matters where our opinion wasn't solicited and where our involvement wasn't invited. Stay in your lane, because here's the problem, and this is the second part. Many times, while we're all up in somebody else's lane, we got our own business that we haven't minded, meaning, why don't you cultivate your own household?
Yeah.
Like this is how I feel. It is a heavy weight on me to be a pastor, to preach and to speak, and yet be able to do so with a degree of authenticity, not duplicity, because I feel a heavy burden to mind my own business before I tell you how to mind yours.
Yeah.
So if my finances are in disarray because I'm trying to look rich while I'm going broke, okay, that's not minding my business. Or buying things that I can't afford to impress people that I don't even know, to get the likes of people that I myself might not even like, that's not minding my own business. If my children are unruly and don't respect me, and they see the duplicity within me, what involvement do I have in your business when I've neglected my business? If my marriage is hanging on by a thread and I'm talking to every other Tom, Dick, and Harry about their marriage, what is my right to be out of my lane into yours when I haven't even stewarded my lane?
Yeah.
So when Paul says, make it your aim to lead a quiet life, mind your own business, what he's saying is, you have enough between your own 2 guardrails that'll require a lifetime of stewarding. If it so happens after you plow your row and you toil your soil and you seed your own area, and you've made sure that, hey, you're tending to your little first church, that be your marriage, your finances, your household requirements, your children, your occupation. Then if you got some excess, hey, maybe pull into their lane a little bit just to help a broken down motorer.
After they go like this.
Yeah, come on over. But yet we are all up in everybody else's business, and then we're wondered, why aren't we respected? Nobody invited you.
Yeah. I mean, I think the most obvious correlation that I see is when Jesus said, why are you worried about the speck in your brother's eye when you got a log in your own? Like, let's focus on removing
Like
this before I.
Please don't miss how condescending that was. Like when Jesus said that.
Yeah.
Like you have a lumber yard in your eye, but you're walking around teaching everybody else how to clear their own.
Yeah.
It's twisted. And I think the church has wrongfully cultivated this permission that we are to police everyone, pull into everyone, and be loud and proud, and then we wonder why our testimony isn't brilliant. It's not bright. Hear me when I say this, because this requires a myriad of disclaimers. We should be truth tellers. We should be able to speak into the darkness and say, this is right and that is wrong. This hurts and that helps. We should do that. But we should never do that at the expense of our own lane, and we should never neglect how often our volume is. I do not have the right to be loud when I'm commanded to be quiet. Mm-hmm. I don't have the right to be in your lane when I've neglected my own. Like, the testimony is, this is me having walked with Jesus now for 20 years. I am less impressed with talk and much more interested in walk. I want to see your kids. I want to see your workplace and the reputation that you have there. I truly believe a wife is a reflection of the marriage. I want to see, does she like you? Or does she just, I want to see that. I want to see harmony in the home, and the kids really look at mom and dad and go, I think the sun rises and sets where they walk. I remember looking at my father. I thought that cat could, he was fast as a locomotive, could leap tall buildings and catch silver bullets between his teeth. I thought he was my Superman. It wasn't because of what he said. Yeah. It's because of the way that he lived his life. And my old man stayed, just so we're crystal clear, he would constantly tell Jack, David, and myself, Sammy, make it your aim to lead a quiet life. Be quiet, man. Be quiet. Don't talk so much. I could hear him. Mm-hmm. Now, mind your own business. You got enough to worry about. Don't be all up in everybody else's gate. And then lastly, my father would, and he derived it from Pastor Jack Cox, he would always say, you show me a man that works hard in his field. That means whatever his occupation was, and I'll show you a man or woman that will be powerful in the kingdom. But you show me one that does not know how to work hard, I'll show you one that won't amount to anything in the kingdom. That simple lifestyle principle was ingrained in me. And I'm not saying that I get it right all the time or that it comes easy. What I do say is that it should be my aim.
Yeah.
It should be the target.
Yeah.
And I think this whole culture of quiet quitting, like I'm just going to sit back, I'm going to take the most, I'm going to give the least. That doesn't glorify Jesus. That's working for human masters, and you've justified your own laziness. But when you work as unto the Lord, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with excellency and do it with everything you got. I think at night we should climb into bed, as Matt Chandler calls it, with a holy exhaustion, saying, I left it all on the field.
Yeah.
That's how I feel when I go down to Florida and I bake all day in the sun.
Get my lips burnt.
But no, seriously, I think being quiet, minding your own business, and working hard, I think more now than ever, that's the testimony the world's looking for.
What are some ways that, aside from like the quiet quitting and I'm just going to do the bare minimum to get by, do you see that manifest in other ways, particularly in the Christian circle?
Yeah, well, one of the ways is that, interesting enough, Paul writes at the end of that, he says, and work to earn your own living, just as we told you before, and then he continues and says, in this way you'll win the respect of those who are not believers, and you will not have to depend on anyone. Now, let me just make this disclaimer. There's certain times that we do need our fellow man to help us in our deficit. Hey, we don't have enough resources, don't have enough food, don't have enough. You're in between you're trying to bridge the gap, but you're in between maybe jobs or you've fallen on hard times, we as a church should rally and be the hands and feet of Jesus so as to fill in the void. But when you're able and when you are healthy and you can work, you should work hard so as not to need somebody else to take care of you. That means the government, that means the state, that means special interest where people want to tether. I think what is happening, we are $33 trillion in debt as a nation. Why? Because the government has now made it their position to give you anything and everything for those that lack, so as you stay indebted to the lender. Mm-hmm. They now are the biggest lending agency on the planet. Why? Because if you are indebted to me, I then control you. Mm-hmm. It's a terrible, terrible thing that we've played into, when it should be that the church should be the greatest lending agency on the planet. We should be taking care of the widows, orphans, sick, and poor. We should be filling in the gaps of those that can't work and that are bedridden. We should be able to take care of children that have absentee fathers. Out of our benevolence, we should be meeting that need. But yet, we have now been enslaved to the government. Why? Because we like using other people's resources to satisfy our lifestyle. That's a terrible testimony. Terrible. I am not talking about those that are on hard times. I'm talking about those that are capable, willing, able men and women that could go out and work, and yet we're still milking the system. Mm-hmm. And so if you can work, you should work hard. You should work hard. And if you don't like working for someone and you feel like I'm not here to make you rich, well, then you go out and you start your own business. Mm-hmm. And you see how easy it is. Which you will find it ain't easy. You see the trial that it is to establish a business, get people that are honest, full of integrity to work for you. And so when it comes to working hard, I just believe we have, especially since COVID, we have cultivated an environment that does not value work ethic anymore. Mm-hmm. And work ethic is central to the testimony of a Jesus follower. It's not secondary or tertiary. It is central. If you follow Jesus, you should be the hardest worker at your company. Mm-hmm. And you should let that speak for itself. Preach less, work more. Because words, it's too much noise. People, I know a guy recently that actually got fired because he was let go. Actually, it wasn't recently. This is going to be a few years ago. He was let go because he was steady. He would make it his aim to everyone in his workplace to go around and witness to them and pray with them and encourage them. And he told me with such assurance, he said, I lost my job for doing, he goes, I was persecuted for the name of Christ. I said, tell me about it. He told me all about it. I said, no. Please don't get it twisted, brother. You were hired. They did not hire you as their personal witness. Yeah. They didn't need a pastor. What they needed was somebody that could work the machines. You neglected your job description to do what you wanted to, and then you tried to drape Jesus over it, tried to Jesus juke him, and be like, this is what I'm called to do. Yeah. That is such a misappropriation of Scripture. What we're called to do is work hard as unto the Lord, and by conduct and ethic, people will see our good testimony and glorify our Father in heaven. This is why Jesus said, but he thought, no, I'll replace that with talk. I'm going to walk around, I'm going to tell them about Jesus. Well, he sent that cat packing. Yeah. And out the door he went with his witness. Yeah. That's not what we're called to do. That's real talk.
Quote Lamar Jackson, nobody cares, work harder.
Come on,
always got to get a Lamar quote in there.
Got to.
No, it's interesting. I was talking with a close friend recently just about what does it look like to be a Christian in the workplace, and those are the things that came up of, well, you probably work really hard as unto the Lord. Well, you're probably someone who maintains good relationships with your peers. Well, you're someone who probably leaves it all,
on the field, right?
On the field. So obviously sharing your faith is an aspect, and nobody wants to undermine evangelism if it's needed. But to say, what does it actually look like? Let's get practical, I think work ethic is a very compelling aspect of that. As we wrap up here, you alluded to the fact that this might be a work in the future.
Yes.
And I think I love all the content. You'll obviously delve into each of those aspects more in detail. But I'm curious what kind of the overarching theme or message, like where that burden, because on the front end of this episode, we said some of these things, some of our topics for this podcast just come from a burden. Yeah. So what's the specific burden that leads to that three-pronged message?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would answer that by saying this. You've heard me say before that Christianity, following Jesus, I believe is a faith that results in addition through subtraction. Meaning, when Jesus said in Matthew 11, "Come to me, those that are burdened and wearied, those that are heavy laden and anxious." And he said, "Take my yoke upon you." Really, that was a means of subtraction. I want to take off of you what religion has put on you. Sometimes I think that in a noise-ridden culture, that what happens is that we feel this unsettledness within us that we need to do more in order to be more influential, more impactful, more usable. I believe it's the opposite. I do believe that we need boldness. I do believe that we should be sharing our faith. I do believe that we should be ambassadors. But what I believe is that what Paul commended the church at Thessalonica to do was, again, addition through subtraction. That I believe your soul, my soul, your soul, our souls find rest when we realize living a quiet life, minding our own business, and working not unto human masters, but unto the Lord, it satisfies something in us that we really intrinsically crave. At the same time, our testimony shines brighter by doing those things.
Yeah.
And so I want to just say it with this tone. I want to say it with this tone as we wrap up. Because obviously you could hear in my tone, I got a lot of angst behind this word. Because I think that we've greatly distorted our testimony. And that grieves me, that we've talked too much. I just feel like people talk too much. And I'm a talker.
Too many podcasts out there. Too much competition.
I know. And at times, even I feel like, am I talking too much? I get it. I tell you, this isn't a measuring rod that I get to apply and not self-reflect with. But I want one to just hear, imagine if you were able to stop the sort of hamster wheel of life and imagine what it would be for you to lead a quiet life. To just worry about your own business and work as unto the Lord. Imagine how refreshing that would be to your soul.
Yeah.
Despite what the world around us tells us, be loud, involve yourself with everyone and anyone's affairs, and do the least and expect the most. That is truly depressing. It's a terrible way to live. And so consider the former and imagine what that would look like in your life. And I guarantee you, you're going to be far happier and Jesus is going to be more glorified.
Yeah. And there's something really encouraging and refreshing to just reflect and ponder on. If I stay in my lane, if I work really hard in that lane, and if I just keep quiet to a degree, he's going to maximize my efforts. He's going to shine through me. I don't need to manufacture anything or conjure anything or swerve in and out of lanes and
Well said.
yell while I'm
Yeah.
manically driving.
Yes.
And it's just very freeing
Yeah.
for me personally. So
Amen.
I certainly look forward to that book.
Coming out this fall, and wherever books are, how do they say it back? Wherever books are sold. Yeah, that's not going to be the case. This is just going to be here at the church.
In the lobby.
in the foyer.
Yeah. Very good. Well,
Thanks for letting me rant, friend.
No, it was
I
a very
appreciate that.
helpful rant, and I certainly hope that our listeners enjoyed it as well and take heed to it.
Yes.
Because I think that there's a lot of fruit to that, and it's countercultural. It's difficult, as we
Yes,
talked about.
it is difficult.
And we don't want to undermine
Amen.
that it is difficult. But if you are listening, I want to thank you for following us as well. Thank you for following us on both Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Leave us a review if you'd be so kind.
Yes.
5 stars preferably. But of course,
nothing less than 4.
yeah, the 4 is where we draw, and then we just get an influx of 3s, 2s, and 1s. But go ahead and follow us on Instagram as well, at Simplexity Podcast. We're on Facebook also. Don't forget that. And we certainly appreciate you guys.
Got an email.
Oh, email. Yep. We got an email list that should be in the description of the episode. Thanks for catching me there.
Love you guys.